Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing really well. I'm back today to talk about my winter favourites, so the things that I've been loving, whether bookish or non-bookish, from December through to February. I always like to start with the bookish favourite, and so the book that I have been loving the most between December and February is Henry V, The Astonishing Rise of England's Greatest Warrior King by Dan Jones. This is one that's been on my radar since before it was published. I always knew that eventually I was going to have to read Dan Jones' take on Henry V, who is one of England's most iconic monarchs, remembered generally very favourably because of his military victories, particularly the Battle of Agincourt in 1415. There are definitely some detractors to him, particularly those who say, was he actually really that effective a king considering he spent so little time in England? And I thought this was a really engaging, informative, very fair, balanced portrayal of Henry V, which presented him not just as this icon, putting him up on a pedestal, nor tried to tear him down, but tried to present him as much as possible as a human man, which, considering the little information that we really have to go on, particularly when it comes to Henry V's personality, is no mean feat. But I thought this was really well done. Henry V felt like a real tangible person, not always sympathetic in every instance. There are definitely things that we can criticise him for, but you always understand where he's coming from, and I think that's a real skill on the part of Dan Jones. Next up, both a music and a TV favourite. You will know that I am in my local amateur dramatic society. We do musical theatre shows twice a year. We just wrapped up our production of Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella and have swiftly moved on to our next show, which is Andrew Lloyd Webber's Jesus Christ Superstar, which is a show that I have actually never been in, despite the fact that I have been around multiple productions when they've been on. I've just never actually been in the cast. And it's actually a show that I didn't know very well before we started prepping for it, aside from a couple of songs. So I love the song Heaven on Their Minds and I love Gethsemane. They are probably two of the most well-known songs in the show, but I hadn't really given it much of a listen aside from that until now. So I've been listening non-stop to the 2005 remastered album, which is based around the 1996 cast, which stars Steve Balsamo as Jesus and Zubin Vala as Judas. That to me is probably my favourite of the cast recordings. But not only that, not only have I been listening to this album so much, but post watching the auditions, I ended up going down a little bit of a rabbit hole watching ITV's Superstar. So you might remember back in the late noughties, mid 2010s, that there were a bunch of these reality TV shows which were based around trying to cast the next production of a famous show, which started off with How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria, where they were trying to cast the new Maria for The Sound of Music. There was I'd Do Anything, which was trying to cast 3 boys to play Oliver and 1 girl to play Nancy. There was Any Dream Will Do, which was trying to cast Joseph in His Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And there was ITV Superstar, which was looking to cast somebody to play Jesus in an arena tour of Jesus Christ Superstar. It ended up being won by Ben Forster, and he went on to do the arena touring production with Melanie C and Tim Minchin. And I don't know, there is something about watching one of these shows post auditions which felt quite cathartic. It's really nice to watch an audition process that you're not involved in. And even though I knew what the ending was going to be, even though I knew who was ultimately going to win, it was still really fun. The entire show is on YouTube, so I will leave the playlist down below so you can watch it yourself if you would so wish. However, the theatre love does not stop here, because I saw 2 shows in the same weekend that just happened to be where they fell. One production which I have seen before, and I think I've mentioned it in a favourites video every time I've gone to see it, but it was my 3rd time in February seeing Hadestown, but with a difference. The difference being that this particular time I was seeing Hadestown was with almost all of the original Broadway cast. They had flown over and were doing a limited 4-week run in order to film a pro shot. I don't really know the details, but apparently it is a lot cheaper to film pro shots in the UK as opposed to in the US. So I was able to finally see a production of Hadestown that included Eva Noblezada, Reeve Carney, Andrea Shield, Amber Gray. The only original cast member who sadly wasn't in my show was Patrick Page, because unfortunately he ended up rupturing his Achilles tendon just before starting the show, and so he was replaced with Philip Boykin, who was absolutely fantastic, and it was a really fantastic production. I will note the seats that we had for the show were not great. I knew that these tickets were going to get snapped up very, very quickly. Me and my friends had agreed an upper limit to the amount that we were willing to pay for tickets, and after about 2 hours, when my friend who was booking for us managed to get in, it was a choice between £200 seats or £20 seats, so we took our chances on the £20 seats, and you will see they were not great. However, because we were right at the back, we were able to stand, and that meant we had a little bit more visibility. But yeah, right at the back of the balcony for Hadestown, I don't necessarily recommend, but it was really a fantastic show. The sound was incredible. Being able to see these original performers play these parts that they know so very well was such a treat. And I really, really hope that they release the pro shot soon. The second show that I saw and absolutely adored was Jamie Lloyd's production of Much Ado About Nothing, which starred Tom Hiddleston and Hayley Atwell as Benedict and Beatrice respectively. Now, I love Much Ado About Nothing. It is one of my favourite Shakespeare plays, definitely my favourite of the comedies that I have seen so far. However, I did approach this production with a little bit of trepidation, purely because I went to see the Jamie Lloyd production of The Tempest back in December that was starring Sigourney Weaver, and oh, it was not good. I didn't like it at all. It was just such a dull production. So even though, like, in my mind I thought, you know, it's Much Ado About Nothing, it's really, really hard to mess up Much Ado because it's such a fun show. And it's Tom Hiddleston and Hayley Atwell, and if I'm going to trust these characters with anybody, I will trust them to play these characters well. I still was a little bit nervous going in, but absolutely do not have any worries going into this. What I wasn't expecting with this was just the sheer amount of physical comedy that Tom Hiddleston brought to the role of Benedict. I really don't want to say too much in case you are going to go, because I don't want to spoil it, but I really do hope that they are going to film this production and make it available and accessible for more people, because it's such a delight and it really deserves to be captured for posterity. But it was a really great, fresh, new production, which I think just makes Shakespeare accessible and fun for more people, and particularly for young people who are maybe coming just because they know Tom Hiddleston or Hayley Atwell, and maybe it'll get more people into Shakespeare, who knows. And then my final miscellaneous favourite is a food and drink favourite. I think last season's favourites video I recommended the Whittard's apple strudel hot chocolate, and this time I'm here recommending their pistachio flavour hot chocolate. This is another white based hot chocolate, and it is so tasty. So yes, it has a white chocolate based with pistachio flavour, and it is so scrumptious and nutty and delicious. I snapped this up really quickly on the day of its release because apparently it was so popular that they were risking selling out. And I think for good reason. This is such a fantastic, delicious flavour. I don't understand you if you don't like white hot chocolate. It's absolutely the best thing ever. And this is really no exception. So there we go, a little bit of a shorter list for the winter months. But those are all of the things I have been really loving through December, January and February. And very much looking forward to what spring will bring. Do let me know about any of your winter favourites, whether they be books, film, theatre, TV, music, or miscellaneous. I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic, fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.